I'm Chip Pickering. I'm the CEO of INCOMPAS, and we're very pleased today to have an amazing panel of both top public policy makers and leaders in Washington, and then two great CEOs who are member companies and on the board of INCOMPAS, who are really serving and building the networks of the future and the platforms and the technologies that our country so desperately needs, especially as we come from the midst of COVID to recovery, and then as we try to set a vision for the future. So let me very quickly introduce our guest today. First, Majority Whip Clyburn from South Carolina. He's the third ranking Democrat in the United States House of Representatives, serves as the chairman of the House Select Committee on the Coronavirus Crisis. And he's also chairman of the Rural Broadband Task Force, and he's also part of the Democratic Faith Working Group. He is a good friend. His daughter, Mignon, knows our industry extremely well, and we couldn't be happier to have him with us here today. And then a good friend of mine, Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas. He and I were elected in 1996 together. I had a small house on Capitol Hill, and in our freshman year, he shared the house, and I rented a small room and a small bed to serve him in.
Big rent, small bed. Yes, I remember.
Yeah, but his family and his work, and just the tremendous leadership that he's provided on the Senate Commerce Committee for Rural Broadband, chairs one of the leading committees on the Senate Commerce Committee that looks at manufacturing and technology and the technology platforms that our government needs and the modernization of that. There's so many things I could say about both of them, but we want to get to the substance of the matter. And Majority Whip Clyburn, we want to kick things off with you. You introduced legislation in the last Congress, the Affordable Accessible Internet for All Act. And I'd love for you to share with us your vision of what you believe America needs for broadband connectivity and your priorities for the upcoming Congress.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me, Chip. I enjoyed the relationship we had when you were here in the House. Also enjoyed it with Jerry. He went off to do what he may think were better things. I'm not too sure about that. I'll just say he went off to do other things. But I'm pleased to be here with you today. As you know, I represent a congressional district that is half urban, half rural. If you look at it from South Carolina's perspective, looking at it from the nation, it's probably 90% rural. But I detected some years ago when I was interacting with Serena Williams, who asked me to help her with an issue. And in return, she agreed to provide laptops for a group of young people from the little county of Clarendon County, where Brown v. Board of Education started back in the 1940s. Now, I thought I was doing something. And when I reported to the principal of the school and the superintendent of the school district what was going to happen, I noticed that their reaction was not what I had hoped for. And then the principal said to me, and what we're going to do with these laptops when they get them. I said, well, we won't have enough for all the students, but you can put them in the libraries and let them check them out, just like they check books out. And she then went on to inform me that the adoption rate in that school district was less than 30%. And that these students, when they checked the laptops out, they would not have any real use for them because they couldn't get on the internet. And that's what started me to taking a hard look at this. And so that led to my creating the Rural Broadband Task Force. I gathered about 24 members, and we began to meet and discuss things we could do to hasten the development of broadband in rural communities. In South Carolina, as we speak, 1 in 10 households is without any access to the internet. And it's so interesting because in South Carolina, we pioneered in educational television. And in fact, we became the go-to state in the nation when Fritz Hollins was governor. And those towers that have been out there all this time, we now have found out that we can use those towers to aid in broadband. The co-ops are there, the right-of-way that they've got for electricity. We've now moved in South Carolina to allow that right-of-way to be used for broadband. So I think that we can do this. This is a $100 billion program that we have introduced. That money would be well spent in making broadband accessible and affordable for all. I will close my introductory remarks by reciting a little testimony that I often recite to people. It's a testimony given by a farmer in a rural Tennessee church back in the 1930s when we were about to celebrate the anniversary of electricity, rural electrification. He stood up in church one night and he said, "Brothers and sisters, I'll tell you this, the greatest thing on earth is to have the love of God in your heart. And the next greatest thing is to have electricity in your house." That was the next greatest thing for the 20th century. I believe that the next greatest thing for the 21st century is to have broadband in every home. Because if we have not noticed anything from COVID-19, it has revealed that we cannot have telehealth or good healthcare without telehealth. We cannot have good education without online learning. And we cannot have a good economy unless we allow for work to be done from home. And so I'm pleased, Joe, of having you here with you today, and I'm looking forward to us working together to make sure that this bill gets into law and that we get this service into every home in America.
Well, Majority Whip Clyburn, we celebrate this week the 25th anniversary of the 1996 Act. Senator Hollings from South Carolina was the lead in the Senate on that, and all the good that has come from the 96 Act. And what we hope to do is start today the conversation just as you laid out your vision. How do we build on that foundation and connect every American to the internet, and much like the country did coming out of the Depression for electricity, achieve broadband to every American. And as I now recognize Senator Jerry Moran from Kansas, he's a great voice for how do we reach rural America, places like Hays, Kansas, and my home state of Mississippi, where we're primarily rural. A lot of communities, one, don't have access to it or can't afford it. So how do we solve this problem? And so I'm very pleased that we have a bipartisan, bicameral team of leaders here who can address what we hope to see as a new national consensus and commitment for broadband. Senator Moran.
Chip, thank you, and good to be here with Representative Clyburn, the whip in the House, and know of his leadership. Appreciate the solid working relationship I had with Commissioner Clyburn in the days of the Federal Communications Commission. And I look forward to working with him in his efforts to see that broadband is available across the country. And Chip, as the majority whip talked about the Act of 1996, it reminded me of our arrival in the House of Representatives, where you were an expert from your previous days in staffing in the Senate, that act. And I can remember you talking about it in 1997 as we started our House days. A lot's transpired since then, much of it good. But as the whip indicated, we learned more despite the tremendous efforts that have taken place over the last 20 years. There's a lot to be done, and it was exhibited in the challenges that people across Kansas and around the country faced during COVID-19, and trying to get our students educated outside the classroom, trying to deliver healthcare without bringing people to a hospital. A reminder that while good things have happened, our work remains. And so I'm appreciative of INCOMPAS and your leadership, the private sector that's with us. While government can be a partner, all of this is only going to occur when the private sector pursues and has the tools necessary to meet the needs. And part of my goal as a member of the United States Senate, and certainly as a House member, was to try to make certain that rural America is not forgotten. It's much easier to provide services in all aspects of the business world in places where there's lots of people. There's money to be made in the number of customers that one can have. But what a challenge when it's so few in such a large area of geography. The congressional district that I represented in the days that you and I were in the House is about the size of the state of Illinois. The largest city is about 40,000 people, so it's rural. And broadband became a cause for me then. And when I came to the Senate, fortunate to serve on the Commerce Committee, have provided leadership in the Appropriations Subcommittee called FSGG, which appropriates, among other things, for the Federal Communications Commission. So I'd say going into the new year, I mean, my focus will be on securing the necessary resources to have the additional success that we need, but at the same time, providing the oversight to try to make certain that the resources that are out there are effectively and efficiently spent. The issue of broadband mapping, for example, we were successful in adding in the COVID relief bill. Perhaps it sounds like it's out of context, but money to complete mapping, and for us to make for the private sector as well as government policymakers to make a determination as to where the money should be spent. The maps have to be accurate, and we had again challenges in that regard, and the success that we had in providing that money in the COVID relief package, along with rip and replace, for example, that gives us a reminder that there are opportunities for us to provide the necessary funds to make the system, to make the policies that we're trying to implement more affordable to the private sector and more available to the consumer. I'll spend a lot of time on oversight of the Universal Service Fund, the RDOF oversight. Again, things that we're doing that are important, but need to be done correctly. I also recognize that there's a shortage of telecommunications workers, people with the technical skills, and particularly in rural America. So we are pursuing, we've sponsored, introduced the Telecommunications Skilled Workforce Act, designed to create a greater opportunity to encourage people and to give them the talent, skill, and the resources necessary to have the ability to provide workforce to this important sector. Mobile broadband deployment, 5G. 5G has a huge component in our ability. The FCC announced their 5G fund. Again, we will try to make certain that money is utilized in a way that gets the result efficiently spent. We have a new committee chairman, I should say. And so figuring out what the new Commerce Committee in the Senate will be like. Senator Cantwell and I have developed a good working relationship on a number of issues, mostly related to aviation and aerospace. And now with Commerce gives us an opportunity to work with the new chairperson of our committee. She has expressed her support for broadband deployment in rural America and across the country. In part, she's highlighted the importance of tribal areas. She's deferred in some instances to some down the dais members, Senator Markey, Senator Schatz, in broadband issues. And so I think there's a strong component on both the Republican and Democrat side that broadband connectivity, operability, and availability is a high priority. So the new Senate, and I would guess that the Commerce Committee will work in much the same fashion it has in the past in regard to broadband, not a particularly partisan issue, not a particularly difficult issue for any of us to see the value of broadband. Work with the private sector, work with the FCC, work with rural utility services at USDA to see that the resources are there, and perhaps at the moment, more importantly, to make certain that they are focused in the places that are so desperately in need of broadband. So look forward to working with Representative Clyburn and certainly the INCOMPAS and its members to see that good things happen across the country. And that should we unfortunately be involved in another pandemic, we're much better prepared in regard to the availability of delivering services in a different way than we were this time around.
Well, Senator, thank you. And as we now turn to the private sector, the industry leaders, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce the CEO of Crown Castle, who was appointed in June of, excuse me, of 2016 as CEO of Crown Castle. Now, Crown Castle is a very unique and great American company. They have either owned, operating, and leasing 40,000 cell towers, approximately 80,000 route miles of fiber. And if you look at the 5G infrastructure, where you have small cells, you have towers, you have fiber, Crown Castle is the company that brings all of that together and all of that to the country. And so they really do serve all of the digital infrastructure and the foundation of the future networks that our country desperately needs. And so we look forward to his insights, what he believes is needed for our country, not only to serve every American, but to win the race, the global race against China, and win the race to 5G. Crown Castle has an enterprise value of approximately $90 billion. Jay and I both have something in common. I went to Baylor for an MBA, and he's a graduate and still active at Baylor. I'm looking very forward to your insights. Anything that you can do to help our public leadership in the country know what needs to be done, the solutions for bringing broadband to every American, and then the support that we can provide from the private sector to our congressional leaders. Jay, your thoughts and your priorities and your vision for what the country needs as it relates to the 5G and broadband future.
Good morning. Thanks for the introduction. And Chip, this is such an important conversation, as both the Majority Whip and Senator mentioned. These are issues that all Americans should care about. This is how we continue to lead the world in innovation and technology, and ensure that broadband is available for every American everywhere. And so this is a topic near and dear to my heart, and I love talking about it. At Crown Castle, there are three things that we're really focused on, ideas that we believe could help make this possible, that we've been advocating for with industry partners as well as government officials. The first is that federal grants be provided to state and local governments to help safely expedite the deployment of broadband and 5G to all Americans. Second is that we fund broadband we help fund broadband deployments in unserved and underserved communities across the country. I think about this as the opportunity to find Einsteins in America. As Majority Whip Clyburn mentioned, there are people today, kids today, who don't even have access to the internet. So the ability to use a computer is worthless without that connectivity. And we're a big advocate for ensuring that we fund unserved and underserved communities in our country, which we think will foster innovation, bring new technologies, and allow the best and brightest in our country to really thrive and help close, as he mentioned, the homework gap that exists. And then the third thing that we're advocating for is that we see an increase in the E-rate funding. E-rate funding goes to schools in order to ensure there's broadband access at all of our schools. And then extend the flexibility of that funding to allow schools to invest and spread that broadband to the communities and to the homes of the students that are actually in those schools. The homework gap exists because over 80% of all homework that's assigned to students requires internet access. So if we provide broadband access in the school and then make an assignment to a student and they go home and there's no access to the internet, we're robbing them of an opportunity both to learn and to excel. And we believe by increasing both the funding of E-rate and then allowing greater flexibility for the use of those funds, we can do a better job of allowing broadband and 5G access in these communities. So I think that's a win for all of us. I think it'll make us better as a country and certainly help our unserved and underserved communities across the country. And we're excited to be an advocate for it, but we're also excited to use our capital to come alongside and invest in these opportunities. We believe that 5G is going to bring a tremendous amount of economic growth and innovation, and there is good reason for us to be investing the capital along these lines. We make significant investments. This year, we'll invest over $2 billion in investing in the deployment of these networks, and that's because we believe there's lots of growth in these sectors. So such an important conversation. Glad to be a part of it, and appreciate all the work, Chip, you and INCOMPAS are doing on this front.
Well, Jay, thank you very much. And next, I want to welcome and introduce a good friend, Rob Hale, who's the CEO of Granite Telecommunications. He brings passion and purpose both to his work, to his philanthropy, one of the great philanthropists of the country, and he and his family. But it is, so his company starts in 2002, one of the companies born out of the 1996 Act. Today, he has 1.75 million business lines. And so whenever you go to any, almost any major mall in any town, walk into a Walgreens or a CVS or a Burger King or a Walmart, Rob Hale and his company and the employees, he now has over 2,300 employees at Granite, and they've really made their mission to be a customer first company, and because of that, it's given them a competitive advantage, and they now have over 1.6 billion in revenue on an annual basis. They've been one of a few handful companies selected for a $50 billion modernization of government telecommunication services. And so Rob has just been a tremendous leader. He is also one of the owners of the Boston Celtics. So just very invested in his community, in his church, in the schools. And so many of our member companies in the private sector work in every aspect of trying to connect Americans and to make America a better place. And Rob is a great example. Rob, I'd love to have you share with the Whip and Senator Moran and our audience your vision for what we can do to connect all Americans and to especially serve the business community, the small business community, in a way that will help our economy recover and come out of COVID.
Chip, thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for the time. Honored to be on a platform with Majority Whip Clyburn, Senator Moran, of course, Jay, it's a pleasure to meet you. We bring a unique perspective, but as Chip mentioned, we're a creation of the 1996 Telecom Act. Without that ushering into competition, I don't know that we certainly wouldn't be to the scale we are today, but I don't know if we would exist. And so it's an honor on the 25th anniversary to have these discussions. And my thoughts revolve around competition. And so I'll be specific in a couple of areas where I think our creativity and our entrepreneurial spirit helped drive positive change in the American reaction to this pandemic. And without competition, I don't think some of these positives, a silver lining, if you will, would have happened in some of these arenas. So Majority Whip, we are very fortunate to be the provider to have been awarded the state of South Carolina contract. Senator Moran, we assist with voice and data in 30 odd school districts, like Wichita, right? Big city, but then like Seward and Sedgwick and Greenwood, smaller towns that need change and they need innovation. And so what we've been able to do is couple some of the assets from some of the bigger companies with a little bit of flexibility and a lot of urgency. So for instance, and Jay mentioned, we're going to find the next Einstein. Einstein said, in the middle of adversity is opportunity. And so what we encountered was some of those schools, and we have 13 different states where we're the provider. And as Chip mentioned, we have the federal contract. We are in the middle of this an urgent need to get education to these kids who, as the Majority Whip said, I think he said 1 in 10 don't have broadband, and yet they got homework and they got to do it. How are we going to fill that gap? We took some of the infrastructure from the incumbents that we were allowed to wholesale, and we worked with some bus companies. And we said, let's put this Wi-Fi on this bus, and then let's put this bus in that community. And so, yes, homework's been assigned, and yet there's no internet to do it. Bringing a little bit of creativity, a lot of urgency, and feeling a need to help fill that gap. We worked with some of our customers and some of the existing infrastructure, and kids did their homework. And I think we can keep doing that. And I think what we need is more competition for broadband. So I think what we have brought, and we support about 275,000 internet access circuits, about 175,000 wireless devices. Most of that is infrastructure that another great big company owns, but that through the Telecom Act, we're allowed to wholesale it. And we bring aggressive competition. We bring change. And so I think Americans get double the capacity if we're allowed to, because of the Telecom Act and hopefully positive change, if we're allowed to bring more bandwidth to more schools, into more small communities. And as Chip mentioned, we do small business. Well, we do small business in two ways: truly small business, but we support about 175,000 locations for some of the biggest companies. Chip mentioned some of the great big names. Those are great big businesses, but they have remote locations. And what they need, just like every other business, is data and voice to get there. Without choices, they're not going to get voice and data to get there. So the staples of our day-to-day American lifestyle are funded by these institutions. And through competition, we bring them. So I think we can help kids. I think we can help small business, but I think we can help large business, which is really a series of small businesses at the same time. And we've relished the opportunity that the Telecom Act created, and we look forward to bringing the same kind of successes in the future. We're partnered. We want to partner with you, with Majority Whip, Senator Moran, and we want to bring bandwidth to the remote sites in America.
That's a perfect way to lead into as you pledge the partnership and the help. Majority Whip Clyburn, tell us a little bit about where your Internet for All Act is and ways that we can be supportive going forward. And so, from the private sector, how can we partner and support? And Senator Moran, the same question is, how can we work with you on the Senate side and bring this new consensus in our country around broadband to a very fruitful end outcome, hopefully where the president signs something that will be of great significance to the country this year. Majority Whip.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to reintroduce that bill in the House, hopefully within the next couple of weeks. I'm hopeful. I am talking to everybody I think I need to talk to, including the White House, and trying to get it to be an integral part of any infrastructure bill. I sincerely believe, and I say this a lot, that we've got to treat what we call the information highway the same way we treat the interstate highway, and it's got to be a part, in my mind, of any infrastructure bill. Now, the Senator Klobuchar is presenting the identical bill in the Senate, and I'm pleased to hear that Senator Cantwell will be the chair of this committee. She was my classmate. We were both elected back in 1992. Of course, she didn't stay here long, but she took that time that she left to build some significant wealth in this field. And she's put in all of that to work now. So Maria and I are good friends. We interact a lot on legislation. So I look forward to working with her and with you, Senator Moran, and hopefully we'll get this bill done.
And Jerry, on the Senate side, you've been a great leader on making sure that our maps, and as we commit the funding to achieve broadband for all, you've been a real leader on mapping. Why is that so important?
Well, Chip, we don't want to spend money where it's not necessary, and we don't want to create competition for the private sector where it's inappropriate. We want the private sector in the places where they can earn a return on their investment to be the provider of internet. We're not interested in creating competition that is subsidized for those who are in the market. So a number of reasons that mapping is important, but clearly making certain that if we're really going to have a certain amount of money to be spent, it gets spent in the places in which the greatest consequence, the greatest difference is made. And unfortunately, the maps were misleading. I have offered to every member of the Federal Communications Commission to come travel Kansas with me, and I can tell you where we're going to drop a cell call as we're going down the road, and I can take you to dozens, hundreds of locations in which interconnectivity and speed don't exist. So just getting the map right is important. And now with the FCC's circumstances of delaying the spending of money until the maps are correct, as we're interested in getting something done as quickly as possible, the maps become even more important to speed up the process of the resources going where they're needed.
Well, thank you.
I mean, if I may, Chip,
yes.
On the mapping business, I think it is also very, very important for the mapping to be done in a very honest way. I just got to say it that way. This is what I've said to Mignon. This notion that if one home in a census tract is covered, then the census tract is covered. That just cannot be going forward. And that's what it has been. It's got to be honest. You and I, you from Mississippi, Chip, I'm from South Carolina. We come from states that economies were built on agriculture, rural plantations, if you please. And when the big house has got the internet, that didn't do it for all the other houses in that census tract. So we've just got to get honest about this. And I'm speaking out more loudly on this with pleasure that Mignon decided not to come back into the government. governmental sector, so I can be more free to speak out on that.
Chip, I also would make the point that just a significant annoyance about good government. The FCC recognized that they didn't have the maps correct, but their solution was to suggest that the private sector, individuals, community leaders, county farm bureaus, take on the task of making the corrections, that you could get a device and go do the testing and provide the information, and the map could be changed. And it has bothered me greatly that it should not be the citizen, it should not be the taxpayer's responsibility to fix a problem created by government. So a false map, recognized to not tell the true story, solution being, well, you go prove us wrong and we'll change the map. Seems to me the people who created the map should change the map, not my constituents.
Absolutely.
And
I
on
want
the,
to pick up on something that Senator Moran said there, which I think is so critically important, is we need to ensure that we have the right aligned incentives. And I think this is a great opportunity. This is a moonshot, trying to get connectivity to every American everywhere in the country. This is a massive challenge. And so as we advocate for government policies and funding, we need to be really thoughtful that incents the private sector to come alongside and invest in these activities. And when we're advocating for the federal grants to the local communities, one of the ways that we think that could make a lot of sense is we incent the local communities to lower the bars and some of the hurdles that they're putting in place to actually deploy the infrastructure, whether it's fiber or small cells. And by lowering some of those barriers, what ends up happening is you're reducing the cost. And by reducing the cost, you're making it more accessible to a greater number of consumers. And certainly communities should be reimbursed for the actual costs that they incur to approve a zoning application or to do whatever work is necessary. But those costs should be reasonable. We should ensure that local governments are not putting up economic barriers to work against the deployment of this technology to all of their citizens. And the great news is when this is done well and done right, it has immediate impact. I mean, we saw during the COVID crisis early on, we provided 55,000 laptops to students. And along with putting laptops in the hands of students who were trying to do learning from home, we provided a hotspot to those same homes. And we were able to basically replicate in the home the similar experiences to what students were able to have inside the classroom. So it will work if we get the incentives right to where industry is working together with government. This is something we can accomplish together, and this is just a great conversation because the bipartisan support is going to be absolutely critical. And both of you gentlemen should know you have our full support as we work on this together. I really appreciate your voice and leadership on these topics.
and Rob,
Jay, thank you.
And Rob, I'd like you to share with us what Granite is doing with CVS as an example of how on our health recovery, you're partnering with another great company, CVS, to get vaccinations out as quickly as possible. And I really wanted the Majority Whip and Senator Moran to hear what you're doing on that front.
This is a partnership we are particularly proud of. Late November, the CDC, Center to Disease Control, as you know, which maybe Senator Moran and Majority Whip Clyburn knew what that meant a year ago. Probably Jay and I did. Most of us probably didn't know what that meant a year ago. Now we do. CDC gave CVS an edict. We want you to start to bring these vaccinations to senior assisted living. And we want you to save lives. And we want you to do it quickly for obvious reasons, for the most urgent reasons possible. And so CVS, a world leading institution, had a plethora of choices to provide that access to provide access so that the nurses who went on premise could document. Needless to say, these are medical records. They need to be documented to document what actually transpired at each of the facilities and who got the medicine. They reached out, CVS reached out to a series of potential partners, but they needed fully equipped, fully installed and programmed equipment in 6 days. And they needed it at their premise, distributed at 7,100 places across America. I'm honored to say within a day, we were the chosen partner. Because again, I think in the wholesale community, we have access to those great big networks. Those are valuable networks. Some of the folks who operate that they build great networks, but maybe flexibility, customization, and urgency are not their calling cards. They are ours. And so within a day, we were given that opportunity. Within 6 days, we were given the mandate, get this device to 7,100 places. We did it within 5. Ahead of schedule, we had them all equipped, shipped, delivered ahead of schedule. And I'm pleased to say 2 days later, a photo went out from a city in Florida of the staff, nurses from a CVS delivering vaccinations to to our parents, to senior assisted living in Florida. And we helped enable that so Americans can be cured.
I know that as we wrap up today, that we're grateful for the leadership of Whip Clyburn and Senator Moran. We look forward to working with you and partnering with you. I'm very proud, as you can tell, of our companies and what they're doing. Jay, I look forward to continuing to work so that we win the race to 5G and why that's so important. And Rob, all the things that you're doing to serve businesses and to help us come out of the recovery, both economically and in a health perspective, stronger. So thank y'all, everyone who's joined us. Jerry, I hope to see you soon in Washington, and Congressman Clyburn, you and your daughter, y'all have just been a tremendous role model as we have come through everything this past year. And so we're just grateful for everyone who's joined us today, and we look forward to bringing internet to every American and working together to achieve that.
Chip, I feel much better about my job now. It's to create Einsteins, which would be wonderful for the company or country. I'll walk away knowing that there is a even more noble calling to what we're doing. What one individual can do in this world is tremendous, and we want no one to be left behind. We want everybody to have the opportunity to succeed. And so thanks, Jay and Rob and Majority Whip Clyburn, for allowing me to be with you.
Well, thank you, guys. It's a pleasure for me to be here as well. Look forward to working with you.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chip, thanks for including us.
Okay.
Be safe, everybody.
Great. Bye. Y'all too.